Three, two, one, here we go. Rainman's Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going. Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man. Just want to give a quick shout out to everybody watching. Thank you very much. I know you're going to find this next raindrop thought-provoking. I feel very strongly about these subjects, and I know you do too. So go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. That way we can continue bringing you great content in the future. So thanks again for being a part of Rain Man's Take, and enjoy this raindrop. The Rain Man. Another raindrop for you tonight. This is kind of, it's becoming a series, which I actually think is kind of cool, and I'm calling it just impromptu guest series. And they happen to be people that are at my house either for a dinner party or in David and his family's case, they're staying with us because they're from the East Coast. David is an old friend of mine from high school back in Massachusetts. Dave, say hello to everybody.
Hey, everybody. I'm so happy to be here, Brian. Thank you for having me.
I love it. I love it. So I wanted to talk to Dave because I think I find his experience very interesting. And I think if I did, I think there's going to be people out there that would as well. So I'll give a quick intro to Dave and Dave and my relationship. And I'll let Dave give a quick kind of CV of what he's been doing since our days in high school. So Dave and I went to junior high together. We went to high school together. Like I said, in Massachusetts, we were public school kids all the way through. As you're going to find out right now, Dave, public school produces a wide range of graduates, the super, super smart ones, and then guys like me. Dave happened to be over here on the super smart spectrum. So Dave, why don't you take it from high school to where we find ourselves today?
Absolutely, Brian. So, Acton Boxell Regional High School in the beautiful town of Acton, Massachusetts, was a great high school experience. And from there, I went to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and I attended undergrad and studied biology there, and was so in love with the school and the location and the medical center and the mentors and the friends that I had developed that I stayed and became a medical student, and subsequently did my internal medicine residency and stayed for a chief resident year. So completing a total of 12 years at Georgetown before I thought that maybe I should not have as much inbreeding in my education.
Not have as much Georgetown
exactly
on your CV.
Yeah, the Jesuits and the Hoyas were good to me, but my love and my interest was to become what's called an interventional pulmonologist. And so I came out to San Diego and studied at UCSD. My mentor, my friend, was Dr. Jim Harrell, who taught me a very old school technique of a procedure to help people deal with blockages in their breathing tubes.
Did that entail like bat's blood and chicken bones, like stirred up in a pan type of witchcraft, or what are you talking about, old school?
No bodily humors involved whatsoever, but there was something called a rigid bronchoscope involved, which is an old school technology that has not been taught to many physicians or thoracic surgeons. And we still use that nowadays to deal with various things in people's breathing pipes and in their airways.
So you're like the last of the Jedi bronchologists.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. You can say that.
Cool. All right. So, I don't want to bog you down with the medical stuff because, quite frankly, I don't understand it either.
No, Brian.
Needless to say, the guy has written textbooks, so he knows what he's talking about. A couple of things I want to mention about Dave's path to get to where we are right now is when he was out here. When did you get out here for your fellowship?
So I was here from 98 to 2002.
Okay. So it was 1998. They first get out here. Mimi and I had been out here already for 3 years. again, I was stationed out here at Camp Pendleton with the Marine Corps, and Mimi was working at UCSD. And at the time, my mom had been talking with Dave's mother, and she calls me. She said, "Hey, Brian, Dave's moving out to San Diego. You should get in touch with him." I'm like, "Great. I haven't seen Dave in 15 years. And we were friends in high school. And then, as that happens, you kind of take a divergent path." And I said, "No problem. Let's do it. It'd be great to catch up with him." And so I told Mimi what we're doing. She's like, "Oh, great. Another kid from Acton. This ought to go over well." And I'll never forget this. So they basically moved into the next condo complex from us. So they were essentially Mahala Drive. So they're Crystal Dawn Lane. So they were basically across the street from me. So I'll never forget this. Mimi and I are sitting at the kitchen sink. We're looking out the window. And Dave and his wife are walking up, and I'm like, "Here they are. This is going to be great." So they come to the door, and immediately with Dave and I, it's almost like we had never been apart. It was just an immediate connection, old school, public school kids. And what's funny is that within the first 10 minutes, Mimi absolutely fell in love with them. Both of them. And for the next 3 years, when you guys were out here, we were inseparable. It was just awesome. Dave is an insane cook. Mimi's an insane cook. That's where I really cut my teeth on washing dishes because I couldn't cook. And kind of the topping on those 3 years is Mimi delivered Dylan.
Correct. My first and my oldest son.
Who is now a junior in college, by the way, which is insane to me to think about that. It's been that long. It doesn't feel that way. So anyway, so we go way back. There's a lot of roots here. And so Dave and Karen and their family are out visiting right now. They're on vacation on the West Coast visiting friends. And I wanted to throw Dave into the fire here. Dave was not expecting this at all, nor was I, but I immediately thought it'd be cool based on a couple of things that Dave has done in his past that I find fascinating, and I think you will too. So the first one up is, like you said, Dave is a pulmonary critical care specialist, and we just lived through one of the biggest pulmonary critical care pandemics in modern time, in recent times.
Brian, I chose very poorly being a pulmonary doctor. If I had known that we were going to be dealing with this, I think I would have gone into gynecology.
Well, boom. So here we go. So talk to me about COVID, the start of it in early 2020. What was it like in DC from your perspective?
So, well, I will tell you a story about the first patient that we admitted to the ICU with COVID. And I had the illustrious benefit of being on call that evening. It was a Sunday afternoon in late February of 2020. And I'll never forget this day because, we had done some preparation, some pretty detailed preparation in the preparing for how we were going to manage these patients, everything from isolation rooms to N95 masking to gowning, ungowning, CPAPing, PAPR masks, everything as far as...
Let me stop you there real quick. Randomly out of the blue, you guys were preparing for this? Was it something that you heard on the news? What was the impetus for Nick to establish for this?
Well, we are in Washington, D.C. and the NIH is present. There's multiple academic institutions here. My small community hospital right in the middle of Arlington is, we received the Pentagon 9/11 victims because we are the closest hospital to the Pentagon. So we have a very kind of academic affiliation and a very kind of forefront location. So we do see a lot of anybody that flies into Washington, D.C. If they're sick, they come directly to our hospital. We are the sole hospital in Arlington. But
did you guys just say, okay, guys, we think that there's going to be a major pandemic. We need to prepare for it. How did we get to that point where you actually had procedures in place to be ready for it when it started in DC?
By that time, this had been something that had been brewing and been talking about for, well into 2 or 3 months going forward. Yeah. And I think our experience was that everything moved from west to east, and Oregon and Washington State were probably the forefronts of, the battlefront in the United States. That's where the first case was really reported, and that's where that basically all spread out of.
And so you're talking with those guys, and they're giving you kind of best practices, or what?
That's a great point, Brian. No, there was, this is the unfortunate issue here, is that there was no best practice. This was all just learning on the fly. So certainly we know how to deal with respiratory failure. Respiratory failure is when your lungs don't work anymore. We know how to put somebody on a ventilator. We know how to run a ventilator.
Thank God you do.
And
12 years of medical school at Georgetown.
And
sorry, I'm making fun of a very serious predicament. Continue.
Thank you, Brian. So to be honest, the mechanisms of illness are the same, whether it's COVID or some other infection. But, this is the issue with COVID-19 is it's just a virus that is so aggressive in its desire to damage the lung. And when the lung is damaged, people get into big trouble. Your body doesn't work when it doesn't get oxygen into the bloodstream. And that's the inherent problem with the COVID virus. It takes out the lung. The lung is no longer functioning. And the job of the lung is to put oxygen into the bloodstream and take carbon dioxide out of the bloodstream. And so everybody.
What was your give me the most memorable, and when I say most memorable, I mean, what was the craziest COVID span of time that you had with your group? Because I remember you were saying that it was crazy for a while there.
Yeah. It seemed the thing that was most striking to me was the slow accumulation of these critically ill patients. So our ICU has 28 beds. Okay. And so we would slowly fill up these beds with just the sickest of the sick people. And nobody got better. Everybody eventually died. Jesus. And we had very few successes. I mean, it's not to say we weren't in some situations successful, but we really didn't have any tools available to us. In our community, in our environment, the unfortunate, for whatever socioeconomic, medical reasons, the hardest hit patients in our community were probably the Hispanic Americans and Hispanic people. And I will tell you, one of the most poignant points of COVID was, I would note that the vast majority of our patients had hyphenated names, which is very classic for, South America. And it would just be, 28 hyphenated Hispanic names filling up our ICU, all critically ill and extremely sick. And,
how long would somebody stay there for, like in one of those beds, before either they got better or they died? Is it
the vast majority of people? No.
It's like 3 weeks.
Yeah,
really,
weeks to months. I mean, that was part of the problem, and that was one of the bigger concerns, is that the vast majority of people would get sick.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about a ventilator is that you can generally keep somebody alive to a certain point. At some point the lungs fail so badly that you can't turn up the ventilator up to 13 to make it work more. But we would use all sorts of old school techniques, believe it or not, to try to maximize the ability of oxygenation. One of the kind of fossilized concepts in critical care medicine was the concept of proning a patient, which means flipping a patient onto their belly to basically improve the oxygenation. And that had kind of fallen into the wayside of antiquated techniques. Yet,
was that what your textbook was full of, antiquated techniques?
No, my textbook had nothing to do with ventilators or any of that stuff. But it was just amazing to me how we would be forced to kind of look at old school things to try to make things better. I mean, perfect example is taking one of the oldest medications known to man and giving it to patients when we thought it would help them with COVID.
So literally it was, you're just relying on training and experience to try to figure out this issue. Did it ever calm down to the point where you're like, okay, we now know what works, that it gets easier, or did it ever not get to that point?
Well, I mean, so, the thought of giving somebody plasma to fight COVID, I mean, that border on, using bodily humors to fight somebody's illness. But yet if somebody, someone said, hey, gosh, maybe we should take the plasma of somebody that survived COVID and inject it into somebody that hasn't survived yet, and maybe the magical bodily humor or antibody that the patient created would help us, so we were pulling out all sorts of things, to try to make something work. But and it was just amazing to me that, most physicians try to think scientifically and critically and do things based on evidence and data and fact. But, and it seemed in this situation, we had, basically this is a disease that was created in a year and a half that we had never dealt with. We have no idea about, the side effects, manifestations, the fact that people form blood clots or are prone to pulmonary emboli, or that, that they go into arrhythmias or cardiogenic shock. It was just an unbelievable learning curve, and we're still learning about it. And
even a year
unfortunately,
and a half
we're not
in,
done with it.
a year and a half in. And where are you right now in terms of what's COVID like right now in DC? Aside from what everybody's screaming about in the news. What boots on the ground? Where are you right now?
I mean, I'll be honest, the vast majority of people in our ICU currently are people that chose not to get vaccinated and have subsequently gotten sick. And, for whatever thought process or reasoning that they chose not to get vaccinated, they are paying the ultimate price in many situations. And that's a lot of who we are dealing with.
Yeah. And out of the 28 beds, where are you at right now? Is it?
The hospital probably has 10 to 20 patients in the hospital. In the ICU, we have 5 to 10. We're not overwhelmed at this point. I mean, it's not a very positive trend. This is after we've fought back with our big volley, which was basically immunization and vaccination, and we're still dealing with this. So unfortunately, I would have to echo the good Dr. Fauci's commentary that the problem here is that people are not getting vaccinated.
There we go. Interesting. Yeah, I like it. That's okay.
I can say that
because you're a doctor.
The people that choose not to get vaccinated, I have to take care of.
And you know what? And we talked about this earlier today. That's a purely libertarian concept. Is my body, I get to control what happens to my body. On the flip side of that is you need to take responsibility and take accountability for that, so that if you F it up, that decision, that you pay the price for it. And so I can completely understand that argument as well. And that's why it's so crazy right now, is that
Well, Brian, let me tell you about this. So the number of ICU nurses, okay, who takes care of the patients in the ICU? First of all, let me tell you that it's not the doctors, okay? It's the respiratory therapists, it's the ICU nurses, okay? And the life that has been sucked out of all these beautiful, lovely young people and just burn them to the core. They got nothing left to give after this year and a half. I'll tell you, if this country thinks that it can go through another barrage of COVID and have healthcare providers chomping at the bit to take care of you, you're foolish, because these patients, these nurses, these respiratory therapists are at their wits' end. They're depressed, they're upset, they're nauseated. The fact that we're going back to this, that basically we're stepping back into this quagmire, this shithole, is so nauseating to anybody that's been through it. That fine, don't get vaccinated, but don't expect anybody to take care of you, because there's going to be nobody that wants to do it. I'm sorry. The benevolence of a healthcare provider has been tried and tested, and there's nothing left to give.
Well, fuck, that's depressing. But that's the reality. That's the reality of where we are right now. So, people have to make their own decisions, but they have to understand the impacts of those decisions, I guess. That's some heavy shit, by the way.
Sorry.
No, it's, I mean, this is
one healthcare provider's opinion, probably, that hasn't had enough sleep, or, has.
But you were on the front, you were actually dealing with people that had this shit. So, all right. So let's talk about, let's switch gears here for another one of the coolest things about Dave that I loved. And we're going to keep the details relatively vague to protect the innocent, but I definitely want to get his feeling about what it was like to do this. And do you know where I'm going with this?
I think I do, Brian.
Okay. So, as I said earlier, Dave's written textbooks. He's a world-renowned pulmonary critical care specialist. And a couple of years ago, a head of a government hired him and flew him over to take care of this particular head of state. So Dave is taken out of DC. For how long were you over there for?
So altogether, I was back and forth probably about 7 different times. And just to clarify, I mean, I was part of a team, and I was asked to be part of a team for a skill set that I have. We mentioned it a little bit before, but basically my talent in pulmonary really lies in my ability to do procedures. I'm what is called an interventional pulmonologist. So I deal with, we end up dealing with a lot of cancer in the lungs, tumors in the lungs, blockages in the airway, pleural diseases, which is things that develop between the lung and the chest wall, and the formation of pleural fluid, that sort of stuff. So I unfortunately like to poke people with needles and do invasive procedures.
Well, it's not, that's not a needle. My impression of what you do to their trachea is like you stick basically a can opener in there.
Yeah, well, I've done that too. Yes, we do what are called percutaneous tracheostomies. A little more advanced than a can opener, but not by much. You're right, Brian.
In my view, again, coming from the kid from Acton who is in the far opposite end of where Dave is. So, but this is what I found fascinating. So this leader of this country that he was brought over, part of this team was brought over to take care of. We're talking essentially at some level, basically it's a monarchy. He was it, and whatever happened to him was, So Dave goes over there, Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court somewhere in the world, to take care of this very powerful. And what was that like?
That was, to be honest, it was quite an honor, Brian. I mean, to be asked to assist with the care of somebody of this nature, I always try to look at every single patient that I take care of as if they were my mother or my father. But you know, when somebody's the head of state and you're invited into their palace to help take care of them, you can't help but be a little blown away. So in the very prestigious team that I was with, you know, lent a lot of that level. But really what it came down to is this is a man that's in need of some help, and
A human being that needed a
yeah.
can opener to their throat.
Well, I didn't.
Not to kind of, or not really.
Well, without HIPAA issues, he needed procedures, and it was.
And you were the only one. You like they brought you over because of your specialty to do that particular procedure.
It was a very unique culture, and I will make this observation that there were native physicians that had been trained and live in this country that were as skilled and as well trained as I was.
And were they pissed that they brought you in?
Not at all.
Really?
And more importantly, they were more than happy to relinquish the burden of care in many aspects. Well, that was the sense that I got.
Yeah.
Meaning, you know, if they never did the procedure, nothing bad could ever happen. So therefore,
so it was a little bit of a CYA going on there?
Maybe.
Okay.
That's why I was like, oh, sorry, Brian. I apologize.
That's good. You're into it. You're emoting, and I like it.
I am emojiing, whatever that means. But
all right, so you go over there. That this particular figure already has a team of physicians, and they essentially say, here you go, guys, or guys, whatever we can do to help. What was
they were in a very supervisory role.
Yeah.
And, you know, by all means, it was a very open discussion. First of all, I mean, the quality of the healthcare in that environment was absolutely unbelievable. So, you know, as a private practice doctor, for example, I have my toolbox of tools that I use on a daily basis. I've slowly accumulated them over 20 years, and I take good care of them, and I'm very happy to use them. So I walk in I walk into this man's home, and I'm expected to do a procedure, and I'm shown this toolbox of tools that is, you know, astronomically levels better than my toolbox. And this is just in his own home.
Really?
Yes. So
did this individual basically have a hospital in his house?
He did. He had basically he had an MRI, a CAT scanner. He had multiple tools and devices, all state-of-the-art laboratory equipment. It was very amazing. There was one event that's most poignant where he was feeling well enough from his illness that he felt he wanted to do some traveling. So we as a group traveled to his second home, and the entire compound and medical group and all his aides and staff traveled there. Unfortunately, while he was out there, he got very sick, and we had to medevac him out of
back to his
main town.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, it was an amazing experience, and I was honored to be there.
Well, now I'm going to give you sort of a Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court vibe here. What was it like? Well, I mean, we came from a public school upbringing, but you obviously since then have become very accomplished. But what was it like to be in that world? That like a royal court, or what? Or were you guys just in the background, just taking care of them? Or?
No, I mean it was truly an amazing experience. I was lucky enough to kind of have a casual conversation with him, you know, with a translator, and that was very poignant. I mean, even in his latest hours of illness, he was so regal and you know, could capture a whole room. And I mean, he was truly a tremendous individual.
Yeah.
So, there's so many people in the world that they're, it's just an honor to meet them.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately, he succumbed to his illness. There was sort of more that we could have done for him, but
Yeah. Dude, the first thing that's going through my mind when you're talking about this is Game of Thrones.
why is that?
I don't know. I feel like the little dude that comes into the king's chamber and
Are you telling me I'm a dwarf?
not at all. Not at all.
Thanks, Brian.
Not at all. I find that stuff fascinating. So,
Not that it's bad to be a dwarf, but
yeah, I think that's one of the things that Karen Duhamel tonight said that you're not supposed to say. But
I know. All right,
So,
you'll be cutting that out tonight.
we digress there. So obviously, those are all Game of Thrones references there. Aside from the Game of Thrones references, and the reason why I personally wanted to know what that's like to be in the presence of that type of an entity, powerful entity. And I always go back to several of the guys that I flew with in the Marine Corps were very, very close to the president of the United States at various points in their career. And just to hear them kind of talk about just basically being a fly on the wall. Now, you're obviously not a fly on the wall. You are until they need you to do something, and then you're not. But just to be a fly on the wall and just kind of be in that situation, to me, I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it was a very surreal experience. I am on my hands and knees, helping this man that is, right. Esteemed leader to millions and millions of people. Yet it's the same thing that I've done for numerous other people. Yeah. And the sweetest old lady that lives in Fairfax, Virginia, and whatnot. But when it comes down to it, unfortunately, the human body is the human body, and when it decides to not work anymore, it doesn't matter whether you're a king or a pauper or whatever. Didn't
they say that Alexander the Great was buried right next to the guy, his donkey handler? They're buried in the same ground.
Hey, man. You gotta love your donkey handler.
Fucking crazy. Yeah. And so I just always found that to be a fascinating, and my imagination runs wild to think what that was like. And that reminds me, it's funny because when I was flying, and obviously I'm not equating the gravity of the things we were doing, but same type of mindset. It was, let's say we were flying around a general or a senator or a congressman or whatever, and they're flying around. And when you're on the ground, all the little aides are running around saying, "Don't fuck this up." Don't, just panicking, freaking out. And what I always used to tell myself is just fly like it's just you in the airplane.
Exactly.
I'm not going to kill myself in the airplane. So whoever else is on board with me is not going to get killed if I don't fly like a jackass. And so, I always found it funny to watch those aides scrambling around.
Yeah.
And then,
hey, buddy, you want to fly the helicopter?
Exactly.
If you think you can do it better,
exactly.
Please jump out.
And another great story, at least great in my mind, talking to a world famous pulmonary critical care specialist here. So I was flying around a general who happened to get out of the Marine Corps and become an astronaut and become a shuttle commander, and flew like 6 or 7 shuttle missions. And the guy was an absolute stud.
That's awesome.
And we were flying around one day, and give him the controls because he's obviously an accomplished aviator. And the helicopter I flew was you had to be used to it, and he wasn't. He was all over the place. But I found it. I guess my point being is that as amazing as this aviator was, he was not. You can't just throw somebody into something to. Anyway.
That was your baby.
That was-
And only you knew how to move that.
And all I had to do was make sure we didn't crash.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
and as long as that happened, then his aides on the ground were going to be happy that I landed with their dear leader in one piece.
He wasn't bagged up.
A little bit. All right. So last one here. Let's see. We've been going for, looks like almost a half hour. I love it. So how many textbooks have you written?
Just a single textbook, and I've done a fair number of articles, but one textbook.
Nice. Do they still use that in medical school?
It's never been used in medical school.
How many people bought it? 10?
I think.
What's your royalty on that? A couple of cents every quarter?
Less than that.
Nice.
And,
on your deathbed, you'll receive total consciousness.
Well, which is good.
So you got that going for you.
I do. But I think the value of writing a textbook is that it makes you a better physician. And so, I would not be able to share my experiences writing that textbook without the benefit of my mentor and my friend, Dr. Jim Harrell, who's from San Diego. And so basically I had the benefit of, I got to learn from the 40 years of his career and chronicle all the cases.
Was he part of that textbook, or was that
correct?
He was. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we were co-authors.
Gotcha.
And so basically I learned how to become a technology expert, and I took his old VHS videotapes and I converted them into digital.
It's surprising that you say that you're a technology expert, because he doesn't use his
cell
phone.
phone.
Right now. Exactly.
The world's worst texter. I prefer to go incognito when I am on vacation, and
which is hard to do, because we were at the beach today. Across his chest it says world famous pulmonary critical care specialist.
A gentleman that is 40 years in his career, and then I accomplish an additional 25 to 30 years so far. So I look at it as cumulative knowledge that is benefiting the community, mankind.
I love it. All right, let's do this. Let's go completely off subject.
Nice.
So there are several people from our hometown that live out here in San Diego. And so last night we had one of our very good friends over for dinner with us. And this guy was just first of all, he's awesome.
He is awesome.
Second of all, he is basically like a living yearbook from our year. So we're like, what is this person doing? And he goes, lets us know. He's also a social influencer, so he's on social media all the time. So I think that's how he's connected with most of our friends, because I'm not really good at it. Dave is not very good at it. So we're asking him this stuff. He's like, guys, this is all on Facebook. What are you doing? So anyway, so we're hanging out last night, and literally, when's the last time you saw him? Was the last time you were out here?
Last
4 years ago?
About 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And Josh Kopelman so I went to Josh Kopelman's first grade birthday party. And
this is how you do it in public school, guys. You grow up together.
I still remember all the people that were at that birthday party, and
don't name names.
I'm not naming names.
Keep the innocent.
Yes. But my good friend Josh here could detail you as to all the current events in each one of those people's lives. And Malcolm Gladwell would have a field day getting to know Josh Kopelman, because he is
what I love about it is, right when you leave, especially, and I don't know what it was like for you, but I kind of always knew I was going to leave Acton and never go back. Right? Not a lot of people did, as evidenced by a lot of our friends that are still living there, which is absolutely fine. And I think I'm probably the exception to that rule. Where I'm going with this is, it's very cool to have somebody who can help you keep completely connected to that stuff, because it's important.
It is.
So.
Well, you gotta, keep yourself grounded. You gotta remember your past, and and your past makes you a better current person and a better future person. So always remember where you came from, and remember your friends and who they are and how they influenced you and how you got to this place.
Is that it? That's beautiful. Well,
Thanks, Brian.
I love it. All right, guys. Well, listen, it's I've taken up too much of his time. He's got to get up early tomorrow morning and hit the road to go see other friends. Very cool, dude. It's
Brian,
a couple highlights,
this is fascinating. I can't imagine that anybody is going to tune in to want to hear about my life.
No,
I appreciate it. If
no,
anybody
no.
does,
Those two experiences that you had, not many people have had them. That's why they're going to tune in for it.
that's fine.
So I'll
Fair
leave
enough.
it at that.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Close out by saying, if you're in the military, the police departments, fire departments, or first responders, if that's you out there, thank you very much for your service. Stay safe. This is the Rain Man with an old high school friend, Dave. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, observations on the world we live in. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.